All right, I think the trickle has slowed down a bit, so I think we're in good shape to get started. I wanted to say hello to everyone out there on our webinar today. Welcome to the 14th Annual Design4Drupal Boston. My name is Chris Wells. You may or may not be a regular here, and you might be used to seeing Patrick Corbett here hosting these things, but he's out of town taking a vacation today. So I'm pinch hitting for him. So I'm a volunteer here also at D4D with Leslie Glynn, and she'll cover announcements in just a moment. For those of you who are not regulars and are new to Design4Drupal, it's an annual event that we have here. It's devoted to Drupal, design, UX, front-end development, as well as business and process challenges that face Drupal teams. So we're typically an in-person event held every summer in Boston, Massachusetts, but in its place through the dark times, through the COVID times, we've been holding monthly webinars on various Drupal design and front-end topics. So we do, however, anticipate holding this year's event in person, so we will keep you posted as plans come together for that. So make sure you're signed up for emails, announcements, follow us on Twitter, whatever you need to do to stay tuned on that. So we're currently speaking with venues about that, and we're thinking around the early August timeframe. And besides myself and Leslie, we have an additional great team of volunteers. Catherine Carruthers handles our video recordings and hosting. Catherine Waldron manages our social media and mailings. Donna Bungard handles sponsorships for us, and Aubrey Sambor provides website support for us. So I wanted to say a quick thank you to all those volunteers. And so I'll turn things over to Leslie now. She has some general announcements.
Thank you, Chris. Welcome, everybody, to the March webinar for Design4Drupal Boston. Today, we're excited to welcome Melissa Miller, the Senior UX Engineer at Pantheon. She'll be talking about how to hack Storybook for Drupal. I just wanted to let you know, I know our next as Chris said, we're hopefully going to have an in-person event in August. Last year, Sharon Steed gave a great keynote in June on developing sustainable empathy systems. The recording, there's a link to the recording here. There's also a link on the website. So that if you missed that, that was a really good keynote. So you can catch up on that. We did have a contribution day when we had our event last June. There are still opportunities to give back. There's always opportunities to give back, to contribute to Drupal. Some of the channels are Project Browser on Drupal Slack, Admin UI for the new admin theme, and D9-theme for the new Olive Arrow base theme. Everybody's welcome to join, whether you're design, front end, theming, coding, accessibility, etc. You are welcome to join. Just hop on one of those Slack channels and say you're new to contributing, and somebody will be there. Mentors are always on there, or folks are always on there to help you out. So it's pretty easy to get involved. So if you would like to, definitely join one of those channels. Our upcoming webinar series in March. I label this one March, man. I have a lot going on. This one is actually February. In March, we're going to have Amy June Heinlein from opensource.com talk about accessible and inclusive presentations. So we're looking forward to that. I'm still looking for somebody to speak in April. I have a couple of people that I'm speaking with. That'll either be on the 12th or the 19th. And then in May, Justin Tupin and Ken Woodworth from Atten are going to be speaking about the Mercury editor. I'll have a more specific title and description and such on the website soon on that particular webinar. So sign up for each one of them at design4Drupal.org. All the recordings from all of our webinars over the last couple of years are on that website. So feel free to browse that and find things that you might be interested in that you might have missed. Send any ideas you have for speakers to Boston@design4Drupal.org. We're always looking for speakers. Drupal 10, as you know, is released. You're going to have to update your websites by November of this year to go from Drupal 9 up to Drupal 10. and also from Drupal 7 up to Drupal 10. So there's a lot of things that are new in there. I just mentioned a few of them here. CK Editor 5 isn't, the next generation of text editors. There's a new Claro admin theme. There's a new Olivero front-end theme, which is, a new out-of-the-box experience. And then there's a new theme generator tool that allows for easier creation of custom themes. So check out those things. Those would be of interest to the people that typically join this, these Design for Drupal webinars. Community events, DrupalCon North America is going to be in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, June 5th to 8th of this year. Early bird registration is now open. So go there and, take a look at what's happening there and see if you're interested and sign up. DrupalCon Lille is going to be October 17th to 20th of this year as well. That is in France. That's the international DrupalCon. That's always a great take as well. So if you have the opportunity and you might be international watching this, sign up for that as well. I don't think registration is open, but there is information on that website. In terms of community events, the upcoming ones this weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, Florida Drupal Camp. That's in person in Orlando. I'm actually in an airport on my way to go to that camp. So looking forward to that. March 16th to 18th. There's two that weekend. One is Drupal Camp New Jersey. Chris will be speaking at that one. And from the 17th to 19th is Nerd Summit, which is more of open source, including Drupal. That is in Amherst, Massachusetts. That's in person. And then in April, mid-camp, they're gonna try and do that one online, virtual and in person. That's the 26th to 28th. And in May, there's Stanford Web Camp, which also is going to be online. So there's many, many more on this community events page on Drupal.org. So it's Drupal.org/community/events. You'll find all kinds of international events there as well. Local meetups, trainings, proposed events like dates that you might want to think about going to that aren't yet published. So there's a lot on that page. This is an online, a virtual event here, but we still need to adhere to the Drupal Code of Conduct. There is a link in the footer of the Design for Drupal website if you need to check on that. But we expect everybody to be inclusive and to treat everybody, with dignity and respect. And if there are any issues, please reach out to myself or Chris is at that same number that I have posted here, 908 Drupal. And we need your help. The 15th anniversary is coming. That's the one that we're trying to hold in person in August. We're really excited to have our 15th year. We're still looking for help. Obviously, an in-person event takes a lot more individuals to volunteer. So if you would like to volunteer, even in a very small capacity, please reach out to Boston at Design4Drupal.org. Would appreciate anybody's help with that. I want to just take 1 second to thank our sponsors. Redfin Solutions is the Gold Digital sponsor. Thank you, Redfin. And our other digital sponsors are EPAM, Dev Collaborative, Atten, Elevated Third, Canopy Studios, Talking Drupal, 108 Degrees, and Pantheon. So thank you to all of our sponsors, and we will be reaching out to folks for sponsorship for our 15th anniversary. Spread the word about today's event on social media. Use the hashtag #4D Boston. Thanks for joining us, and remember to always be kind to everybody that you interact with. There'll be a Q&A after Melissa's talk, so please put your questions in the Q&A feature. We have chat turned off just so it's not confusing where to put your questions. So if you can put them in the Q&A, that would be great. And Chris will go through those questions with Melissa at the end of the presentation. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Chris and to welcome Melissa.
Great. Thank you, Leslie. And just following up on that Q&A, feel free to ask questions as you have them, and we'll just queue them up and we can ask them at the end, but throw them right in the Q&A. So today's speaker is Melissa Miller. She's a senior UX engineer. She's working on the design system for Pantheon. She's a full stack web developer with extensive Drupal experience and a background in both visual design and photography. Melissa holds a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in photography and a master's degree in city and regional planning from The Ohio State University. Melissa previously worked for many years at The Ohio State University and co-led the creation of the first university-wide design system there. And her Drupal contributions include helping to organize Drupal Camp Ohio in 2012 and 13, and she's been helping organize Bad Camp since 2018. So we're very excited to have Melissa here to talk to us today about using Storybook with Drupal. So welcome to Design4Drupal, Melissa, and I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Hi, thank you. Happy to be here. I'm gonna share my screen. All right, good morning, good afternoon. It is morning for me, so I'm gonna try to be chipper as possible. But yeah, I'm here to talk to you about how to hack Storybook for Drupal, basically to make it more useful for Drupal themers, site builders, developers. A little bit about me. Chris already shared that, so I'll just hit the few things that he didn't hit. Musician, dog person, located in Oakland, California. I grew up in Michigan. I lived in Ohio for first, 20 years of adulthood, and then I moved out to California. These are my dogs, just showing how cute they are in case they interrupt us. But I think they're good. I think they're taking their post-breakfast naps right now. So we'll just get on with it. So what is Storybook? This quote here is actually from Storybook, the Storybook website. It's basically a front-end workshop for building UI components and pages in isolation. I'm going to also add that it's free and open source. But what is it really used for? So it's previewing and documenting UI components, hosting component libraries, design system technical implementations, interactive style guides, etc. It's just kind of how you want to frame it. It doesn't change what it does, but it's just kind of like, where does it fit in your ecosystem and how you want to use it. In particular, with the work I'm doing now, I'm using it kind of as a technical implementation of a larger design system. So the design system is like the set of rules and guidelines and designs, and then we, express it in different ways. We express it in a Figma file, we express it in a React toolkit, a Drupal toolkit, etc. So each of those technical expressions or implementations, I build a package, repository for it, and a built-in Storybook so we can preview everything. So it kind of depends on your use case and what the scope of your design system is. If your design system only has one technical implementation, you could actually build your whole design system in Storybook and all the documentation and everything. So it really depends on how you want to frame it and how you're using Storybook. So I'm just gonna kind of click over to it really quick. I have this demo project that I'm going to keep referring to throughout, and I have a link to it at the end. Just something I put together for this purpose. And so this is an example page of Storybook. When you're in Storybook, it's everything is customizable. And I realize maybe some of you already know Storybook, so this is just kind of for people that are like, what is Storybook? So this is a page that explains the button component. So all this is customizable. The top part, the documentation is written with Markdown. There's a live example, so you can see as I hover, it changes. If I focus, it shows the focus state, etc. So it's basically your component is live and you can preview it. And you could show code here, and it's basically showing what the Markdown is for the button. And if you notice, if I change some values in these controls down here, so this section is called the controls, it previews live. So I can just say button label. I can change it to a different type of button, like I want to see what the secondary button looks like, and you'll see that the code changes based on what I've written in the twig template in the background. So if I want primary, it doesn't get a modifier class. If I go to secondary, that gets added. If I change the button type to a submit instead of type button, it changes here. And so this is basically your code sample is saying like, hey, this is, we kind of go through the permutations, get the button how we want it, and then we copy this code in. That's one way to do it. But yeah, so this is just kind of like a quick example to show you how cool Storybook is before I try to sell you on using it. In addition to clicking through here and changing the arguments, we can actually set predefined argument sets as well. So I'm just going to kind of reset these back to the default. And if you look, there's this concept of sub stories. So this is the primary story, and these are essentially sub stories or child stories. And so we can pre-configure buttons. So I want to see what the secondary button looks like. And for example, the button reverse, we only use it on a dark background. So I have this preset. I changed the parameters on here so the background is dark. So this reverse button shows up on there. So this is, Storybook has each component, or each component page has two sections. So here's the docs section, and then there's the canvas, which kind of just gets you right to the controls. And then it shows you some more, add-ons you can use. Let's see. So for example, you can change the color background. So if you want to see what this looks like on a dark background, go there. But for example, this might be a way to test, say, hey, I want the reverse variant, but I want to try it on this dark teal background. So I'm going to switch it there. Yeah, it works. Okay. So yeah, it just kind of lets you preview it in more detail without pre-configuring the sub-stories. A few other things in this section worth pointing out are you can set up viewports to kind of see how they would work in responsive design. Storybook comes with, I believe, like three presets, but you can very easily override those. So I basically created breakpoints of a project I'm working on and just kind of copied them over to this demo project. So we can see small, medium, large, max, container. Obviously on the button, it's not really going to do anything, but on more complex components, when you start to get into grids or card grids or whatnot, you can go through these breakpoints to make sure your responsive design is correct. And then one final thing before we kind of jump back, I just wanted to point out these panels at the bottom. So controls are great. They're like my favorite thing of Storybook. But there's also additional panels you can add on. So one is very commonly used as the accessibility panel. It's powered by Axe in the background, and it's not going to catch everything. It's going to catch what you would normally catch in an automated accessibility testing, but it's a nice first check through this. So you can see everything's passed in here. If I did have violations like, contrast or whatnot, it would send you a link. It would include a link here about how to fix it, and it would point you to the official guidelines of why this is a violation. So it's a nice thing to have. And then the other one, again, it's an optional, it's a community contributed plugin, is source code. And I'll get to why we're doing this, but this actually shows the twig. And so this is actually my cue to jump back over here and explain why we have to do that separately. So yeah, so that's just a super quick tour of Storybook. But first, should you build a component library? Sure, maybe, why not? So I'm going to just kind of throw out a few scenarios. This is obviously not exhaustive, but if multiple sites or themes will be using the same UI components, yeah, it's really great. It's efficient. It helps with consistency. You have all these done, and then you import them into your theme and use them. If your website is being built by a different developer or team, yeah, and you want to do a handoff, this is perfect. This is actually one of the scenarios that prompted me to build this. I'm handing it off to a Drupal development team to build. And so they already have all the front end in here, and they just kind of put it together. And then maybe you want live prototypes before building your site. Sure. And then maybe you don't need one, but you want one because they're cool. Yeah, go ahead. So these are just some cases. Typically, if you have a one-to-one situation, if you're building a website, one Drupal website, and you have one set of components and that's all they're going to be used, it might be a bit overkill. You might not need it. Just build your theme. But I'm not going to tell you what to do. So But yeah, so here's some common scenarios though, where you might want to build a component library. So why do we need to hack Storybook? So this is kind of what I was getting at before. If you notice on the list over here, there's not a Twig version or a React or Drupal version. So we kind of got to build our own. So if you look, there is an HTML version. So that's the closest to what we need. And so we just kind of modify it or hack it a little bit to get it to do what we want to do. But we're essentially using the HTML version of Storybook. So the other question is, do you need to hack Storybook? Probably not. You can, and I'll explain how, or at least give you some tips on how, but there are other frameworks with built-in Twig support if you're not specifically tied to Storybook. What I've used in the past is Fractal. I don't think it's as good as Storybook, but if you just want to build a component library or a toolkit for Drupal only and nothing else, it might be a good place to start. It's got built-in Twig support. It's basically really easy to swap out in and out the templating system in Fractal, whereas Storybook, you kind of pick a flavor and run with it. So you might want to check out Fractal. Also, there are other projects out there that have already done it for you. You might be familiar with a couple in the Drupal community right now. Emulsify is a very big one. It's by 4Kitchens. They've been in this space for a while. They used to do a pattern lab version. Now they're doing a Storybook version of this, I believe, with Gatsby. I haven't looked at it in about a year, but I remember thinking it was really cool. And then Wingsuit is another one. I believe it's done by some Drupalers out of Europe, but it takes a very similar approach to Emulsify. And it's very cool. So if you don't want to start from scratch, you might want to check out one of these projects. There's another new one in this space. It's a component, the whole component libraries or CL components ecosystem. It's a little different than this, so I kind of left them off, but they're taking, I believe that one's done by Lullabot, but I believe they're taking a different approach to this. So that might also be something you might want to look at. But you might want to do it yourself. So why DIY, and why did I do DIY? This is my main reason, is I wanted to keep the toolkit lean and build it from the ground up. I didn't want to take like a big project and strip it down. I looked at Emulsify, I thought it was really cool. It was a little bit overkill for what I was doing and for my particular scenario. And plus, point number two, I also kind of wanted to learn myself, like how everything worked, and just to have full knowledge of what was going on, and so that I can extend it and customize it to meet my needs, rather than kind of having to strip back something that was, pretty opinionated. And then third one, this is not really this doesn't really apply to me, but if you're an agency, maybe you want to build your own starter kit. If you're doing design systems or component libraries for clients, you could actually build an unstyled version, just have all the components built, and then you style it per client. So yeah, I've known some agency folks are kind of taking that approach. Yeah, so that might be why you want to do this yourself. So before you modify this, though, I would recommend learning Storybook. Just the basics. You might already know Storybook, and if so, just skip this step. But I would recommend learning the React version of Storybook. It was the original. It's the most documented. I would just spend a day learning just like this section down here, like to get started in writing stories. Is probably enough to give you a good understanding. And the reason I'm suggesting this is because before modifying it, it's good to know it's good to kind of have a baseline to know what we're changing and why we're changing it. Plus the documentation, since we're basically taking the HTML1 and changing it and changing some of the syntax, there is no official documentation for it. But a lot of what you can get about how to write the stories, the component style, CSF is component, I think it's component style format or component story format. And if you learn that, it doesn't matter which version of Storybook you're using. So I would recommend just, spending a day learning the basics. And if you look at their documentation website, Storybook, I don't know, it's Google Storybook. I can't remember the exact URL, but they have this documentation, and in the Write Stories section, I would recommend looking at the args, parameters, and decorators. You're going to use those no matter what version of Storybook you're using. And then the naming components and hierarchy are universal. So yeah, that's just, obviously do whatever you want, but that's just kind of a recommendation. So now let's talk about like how we're doing this, right? Yeah, so anyway, so we're gonna these are the steps. So these are 4 main steps. You can a lot of these are left up to interpretation, and I'll explain which ones and why. So these are just kind of the 4 main pieces. How you go about these pieces really depends on you, your personal preferences. I'm not going to be super opinionated. I'm not going to be like, you have to do it this way, but I'll kind of explain what I did and why I did it this way. And I'm going to share a link at the end. I'm going to provide a link to a sample project, the one I kind of clicked through earlier. So feel free to fork it or pick it apart, whatever. But I'm going to kind of just walk through these 4 steps, kind of explain my thought process and explain, like, a few of these are kind of cut and dried, I'll just be like, this is how you do this. And the other ones the other ones that are open to interpretation, I'll just kind of explain why. So I'm just going to kind of walk through these 4 steps. But first, why are there optional steps? So steps 2 and 3, if we go back and look, steps 2 and 3 are optional. And both of those steps are related to emulating Drupal in Storybook. So we're basically making it so we can write our components to be Drupal friendly, and then we're telling Storybook how to interpret those. And this makes it easier when you go to add this component library to your theme, because we've already written it with Drupal in mind. However, they're optional because there may be a case where you don't want it to be Drupal specific. Maybe you just want a Twig Storybook. Maybe you want to use it in WordPress or Craft CMS or some other Symphony, some other project that uses Twig. You may want to skip those Drupal-y steps and have this more agnostic. So this might be great for if you're an agency that does Drupal and WordPress. You may just want to have the component library be a bit more agnostic. But I'm going to walk through the steps regardless. All right, so step 1, configure Storybook for Twig. So essentially, we're going to start a new project via NPM. This project it's the best way to do it. That's how you install Storybook. Install Storybook/HTML as a dev dependency. It'll come down with some other dependencies itself. That's the only one you need to ask for. And then there's these Twig and Twig loader packages. Twig is essentially, the Twig NPM package is essentially a JavaScript version of Twig. I believe there's one out there called Twing. You can probably use that as well. I've done it with these, with the regular Twig and the Twig loader. And then you're gonna basically edit Storybook's webpack config to recognize Twig, have it recognize Twig in addition to HTML. And so here's a little code snippet that would do that. It's super simple, but the link in there the link in the slide to my repo will show you where to put it and whatnot. I'm trying not to go too in depth in the code. I just want to give little snippets, so when you're looking at the project, you can be like, oh, this one goes here, etc. So yeah, it's a real simple. You're basically telling Webpack to recognize Twig. Step 2, you want to emulate the Drupal specific filters and functions. In this particular case, you want it to recognize Drupal specific Twig filters. So someone like all this stuff was kind of already done for me, and I just found it. I went out and found it in different places. So I didn't write most of these plugins that I'm going to reference. I didn't write any of them actually. But there's a Drupal Twig extensions NPM package out there, and it adds Drupal specific filters to the Twig.js. So it's going to add stuff like clean class, clean ID, format date, I believe a render, translation. There's the list if you go to the NPM page for that. Yeah, so basically it fills in the gaps where plain Twig meets Drupal Twig. And so we're going to enable that globally. We want that in all of our Twig files. So you enable that globally in the Storybook preview JS file. And it's 3 lines of code. It looks like that. Yeah, so that's super easy. And that just makes those filters available to you in all your Twig templates. And then we're going to talk about Drupal attributes. So there's, again, another lovely package that somebody put together, Drupal attributes, and lets you simulate Drupal attributes per story as necessary. So this is not something we install globally. I don't even know if it works if we were to install it globally, but you install it per story that you want to emulate a Drupal attribute object from. So you would import it in the top of your stories file. And that'll make sense when you learn Storybook, what the stories file is. And then you're going to instantiate a new Drupal attribute for each story or arg that requires it. Args are essentially like props that you're passing to your stories. So if you look, here's an args for, I believe this is I believe I did a screenshot of the text area, the text area component in the sample project. So that has 5 args. So 5 variables that you're going to pass to Twig, essentially. So you're going to say what's the background color of your form? Light, dark, whatever the other choices are. And then how many rows and columns do you want your text area component to be? And then if you look at the bottom, the last 2 args are attribute based. And what this does is it lets us kind of emulate the Drupal Twig template, which I'll show you in the next slide. So for example, the wrapper attributes is just a placeholder. And then the regular one is we're actually going to use some of the functions, the methods that come with it. So if we look, here's a sample Twig file for that story where we're applying it. So if we look up at the top, we're setting the classes. We're grabbing the background color arg to make the class array, or in the class array here. And then we're applying it down here. We're doing attribute, add classes. So this is all common stuff you see in Drupal theming. You can add the add class, you can do the set attributes, you can chain these together. And so we're basically taking this arg, and this arg, and adding it here. The wrapper attributes, we're not actually doing anything in Storybook, but this is something that you're going to need when you get this into Drupal. So we're just having it here as a placeholder, and that by instantiating it as a new Drupal attribute, it just kind of lets Storybook know how to handle it. So that's a cool thing to do. So if you use this attributes object a lot in your templates, this is a good thing to add. Next one, kind of similar along those lines, is we want to emulate Drupal behaviors. Very same reason we're doing the other stuff. Basically, we want to be able to write our JavaScript wrapped in behaviors. And so when we bring it over to our theme, it's already done. And so we just have to basically tell Storybook how to interpret that. So we create a function to mock the Drupal behaviors object. This, I believe I got that from Emulsify, and I've commented in the code that's where I got it. But they created that function, and we're basically wrapping it around all JavaScript, component specific JavaScript for our components, and it basically just tells Storybook how to read that. If you didn't wrap it in this, it would just be like, whoa, what's going on? And then we're basically just bringing over our theme, and Drupal knows what to do with it. So it's pretty simple how to do that. All right, step 4. This is the big one. This is the big one in the sense that it's really up to you how you want to do this. There's essentially 4 subparts of this. I'm just going to kind of click through them real quick and explain them, but essentially you decide how this happens, but it kind of needs to happen. So you determine your file asset structure, you prepare the assets for distribution, configure your distribution method, and then host your Storybook instance. And so I'll kind of walk through each of these steps. Just checking time. We're good on time. Okay. So these are like when you're determining your file asset structure, this is the absolute most variable part. And you kind of want to think, how do you want these to end up? Like, do you want a global CSS file? Do you want individual Sass partials? Do you want both? What are you doing? You decide what you want and then work backwards to put it there. In my example project, I kind of did overkill. Like I did both. Like I did compiled, I shipped the SAS partials, just to show like all the different ways you could do it. But it's really all about what you want your end result to be, who's consuming this, how do they want it. So you just kind of figure that out. What do you want your build directory or your dist directory to look like? So just basically ask yourself those questions and make it happen. So prepare assets for distribution. So basically wherever you decided from the previous step, make that happen. Set up your directory structure. You're going to, use scripts to do this, but, and then make any modifications necessary. So for example, if you're using, relative paths, how you're linking your twig files together in your toolkit, but you want to add a namespace to them when you go to package them, you could do that at this step. Or, just there might be other examples where you want to modify, or there's comments you might want to cut out as you ship it or whatnot. Again, totally up to you. But then basically script that, whatever you decided in those first 2 bullets, just script. I use Gulp, but you can use Grunt, Webpack, Node scripts, probably use a shell script. I don't know, just make it happen, right? So this is kind of where it's like, do it yourself, decide what you want. Yeah, so in particular, my example will show you how to do this in Gulp and different things. This is where you would also compile your CSS as well. Okay, so then you configure your distribution method. This is going to be NPM or Composer. My example project uses Composer. I think if I were to do it again, I might use NPM. I don't know, thinking about that. And then you want to update your config to only ship the files you need. Hence, you should not include all your source. Like when you're shipping this package, you don't need the storybook, you don't need all the config. You may want to exclude other files. You basically just want what's in your dist or your build folder. And so you could the way to do this is by an npm ignore, or I think you can use the git attributes to exclude things from composer packages, stuff like that. So yeah, just kind of keep it clean, and then publish your package. CI script is great. GitHub Actions, Circle CI, whatever you're using, you can just script it to publish on release, or you can do it manually. And then the final step is to host your Storybook instance. This is sort of optional, but it's kind of defeating the purpose, I guess, if you didn't do it. But Storybook can be compiled to static HTML. It's kind of like a snapshot in time when you're compiling it. I typically do it every time I do a release. I'll do a tagged release. I'll publish the Storybook, and I'll publish the Composer package at the same time. But yeah, you can build it out to static HTML again via CI and just kind of host it anywhere. GitHub Pages is great. Pantheon's front-end sites. You can, Netlify, whatever. It's, host it. And this gives consumers, the people who are implementing the Storybook into your theme, if it's not you, it gives them that playground to like look at all the arguments and see the variations of the components and start to put them together. So we're going to tie this all together. So now that this is all done, how do we actually use this? And so most of this in this section, I'm not going to go through this in great detail. I'm not going to get into the weeds, but I'm going to link to documentation about this. So I'll just kind of pop over real quick, but there's just a couple steps here. So you're going to import the package into your theme. You could do it via Composer. Composer installers can actually plop it right into your theme for you. The example workflow that I've linked to shows you it shows 2 scenarios with Composer. One is if you're doing if your theme is just part of your site repository, it gives you an example for that. Or it also gives you an alternate way to do it if your theme is in a separate repository. But yeah, I'm going to also give out a shout out to the components module, which if any of you have been doing this kind of work in theming, you're probably familiar with it. It basically sets the namespace for when you're doing twig includes, embeds, stuff like that. It's pretty great. So yeah, you get that into your theme, and then configure the theme to use your assets. Personally, I recommend building the theme from scratch. You'll have full control. It's not that difficult. I just recently learned about, well, I don't know, about a half hour ago that there's now a theme theme builder, what was Leslie saying, for Drupal 10. So yeah, but I recommend building a theme from scratch. You have full control of everything. You eliminate any sort of style conflicts that may happen. So I have instructions for how to do this. I'm just going to pop over there real quick. It's in the example project. It's just kind of like, hey, define your libraries. Some of you who've been building themes forever might know how to, obviously will know how to do this already, but if you've never built a theme from scratch, this kind of walks you through how to do it and implement this component library. So yeah, that's here. Just want to give a shout out. And then the last item I want to talk about is how to make the most of the setup. So I use the term loosely, you've hacked Storybook, you've embedded it, imported it into your theme, integrated into your theme, but now what do you do with it, right? So don't rewrite twig files to match what you did in the component library, just include them. You can include, embeds, extends, any of those twig directives to pull them in. In a way, the way that I like to approach this is I actually, when I'm building a component in the component library, I like to go to Drupal first. I like to look at the twig templates from Drupal core and use those as my starting point. And so that I, strip out the things I don't need, add the things I'm adding, for my component. And they're going to work when they come in there, when they bring them to Drupal, especially the more complex ones. Like if you're maybe like the pager, something that has the logic already built in, you don't really need to reinvent that. So yeah, I usually start with Drupal twig files when possible, customize them to my need, and that's what I put in the library. So then when you go back to the theme, they work in most cases. So yeah, so don't rewrite twig. The other thing is, unless you're going for the framework agnostic component, write your components specifically for Drupal. Kind of what I was just saying, but yeah, so keep Drupal in mind as you're writing them. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's what I've prepared for today, but I'm happy to answer any questions. I believe Chris is going to send them my way, but yeah, here's a link to the demo project. This will go to the repo. The repo has a link to the hosted Storybook right on the front page.
Thank you so much, Melissa.
Yeah, no problem. I'll just keep this up here for a second, and then I'm happy to answer questions.
Perfect. And this may be answered by said repo, so that might be excellent. But the Jim Birch has asked, is this the source code add-on? And I'll throw it in the chat. So I'm wondering if for the source code, if you're using one called Storybook Code Panel, or if you're using a different one.
I'm going to check right now on my package file here. Let's see. I'm using one called Storybook. No, it's called Storybook Source Code Add-on.
Storybook Source Code Add-on. Excellent.
Okay, so here's the one Jim linked to. Oh wait, you can't see my screen. No, I haven't tried this one yet, but I will look at this one as well. Yeah, it's called I lost my screen here. Storybook-source-code-add-on. But thank you, Jim. I am going to screenshot this one and try it as well.
All right. And the next question comes from Diego Castro. This might need some clarification. Do you know how we can emulate the Drupal pattern function? I'm not sure I'm familiar if there's something specific.
I actually don't know what. Yeah, I actually don't know what that is. So I'm going to say I don't know.
Yeah. Diego, if you want to clarify your question, add it back into the Q&A. We'll see if we can get you the answer you're looking for. Someone else, this is a pretty good question, has wondered, how long does it usually take to set up Storybook for a new project? And I guess we're not thinking about all the parts of designing components, but just the actual sort of technical, could you do it in a day or a morning or a week?
Probably like an hour. If you know what you're doing, or if you have like a recipe or steps to follow, it's pretty quick. Like if you were gonna start like a React storybook, you could do it in like 20 minutes. It's just a matter of, running a few scripts. I think there's an NPX script for it. If we're going to do this Drupal one where we maybe have to change some stuff, maybe an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, pretty quick.
Good, not bad. You can kind of find a blog post and get started, or maybe you can spin up
can-
Melissa's demo project to
Yeah,
use
you
as
can
a
fork
reference.
that.
Right?
Yeah, you can fork my demo and go from there, or follow these slides. Again, this is just want to point out, the project I started doing this like last year, so I haven't done anything with Drupal 10 yet. So if there's been improvements for Drupal 10, it's not referenced in here, but this works great with Drupal 9.
Excellent.
Actually, no, I take that back. The one I'm doing at work for Pantheon, they actually are using it in Drupal 10 now. I just personally haven't used Drupal 10 yet.
Oh, cool. Good. Good. Okay. This is what I thought Diego may have been talking about, and he did clarify a little bit. So there are some modules like Drupal patterns and UI patterns, and then you can include a twig file from a UI pattern. So it's kind of a paradigm for component-based design that's been introduced via Contrib. So I just didn't know if you had any experience with that.
No, I haven't. I'm actually gonna copy that as well to look into it. I have not looked into that. I typically use that components module just to set the namespace, and then basically use a regular just the regular Drupal, because you know how Drupal makes you have the HTML.twig. I usually just have those, and then I import the embed or import the ones from the toolkit. So a lot of times there's a one line of code, just like import this one from here. Sometimes there's like I import it and then there's some field mapping as you're coming in.
Got it.
But yeah, no, I don't know the answer to that other question.
Excellent. So Kate Bronstad has asked, do you usually have an intermediary testing workflow? So, and the reason for this question is, do I understand correctly that whatever is in /dist is automatically included in sites that have a theme pulling from that folder? So how would you stage changes to the component library?
I typically, well, if I'm reading this correctly, you can, on your staging site, you can actually pull in, typically in the site, you're going to pull in like a tagged version of this if we're following this method. But you can always pull dev versions. You can pull branches and test it into your site before you actually pull the tagged version, so you can see that ahead of time. The other, but typically, the team I'm working with that's building the Drupal site, they have a staging set up for their site, and when I do a new release of the toolkit, they'll test that in their staging site. So it's not right in production, but yes, to answer the first part of her question, yeah, it just gets pulled right into the site. But so usually the staging is done on the site end.
Excellent. So I think this goes back to your slide about, when does it make sense to use a component library or design system? So do you think it makes sense to implement Storybook for a project that is already done? It's already ready and it's in maintenance or support mode, but the project itself has launched. Does it make sense to maybe, or when might it make sense to sort of retrofit Storybook over an existing project?
Yeah, it probably doesn't make sense. It would if you plan on, if you there's a couple of use cases, right? So if you are building, if you're going to be using it in future sites and you know that for sure, it might be a great reason to abstract that out to a component library rather than having it all built in your theme. But there's not a whole lot of efficiency if it's just a one-to-one and your work is already done. Yeah, I think it would be hard, depending on where you work, it would be hard to sell that as something worth spending time on.
Right. Yeah, I like that you said, you know, if you're really got one website using this design, it might not make sense. You know, it might be a little bit more work than is necessary. But
Yeah.
as soon as you introduce a second site or multiple sites, especially across multiple platforms, you know, a WordPress site and a Drupal site and other things that need to share components and have the same look and feel, then it makes a ton of sense. And there's gray area in between.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing.
Good. I think that's all the questions that we landed in the Q&A, unless anyone throws anything in last minute. I'll leave it to me to say thank you so much for an amazing presentation. This has been something I've personally been pretty interested in. You know, between this or Knapsack or the Emulsify or some of the other tools you mentioned, it's very cool.
Yeah.
We did get one more question that just popped into the Q&A before I turn it over to Leslie.
I see it.
Okay, a nice Drupal specific question. If I'm adding Storybook HTML into my theming process and then I'm sub-theming another theme, can we get Storybook to grab the base theme libraries like the CSS and JavaScript from the base theme, or would I need to reference those component by component? And my first answer to this is wait until we get the new theme generator. Well, we have it for Drupal 10, and you'll never have to worry about a base theme again. But I don't know if you had any insight into injecting sort of other theme libraries into Storybook.
Yeah, you can. Basically anything that you can script, anything that you can script, you can do that. So you could either do it most likely at your, I would do it at your main CSS. I would just import those other ones into your main CSS. If you only want it, so it gets compiled with everything else. But I think in his case, it's going to stay separate because it is a base theme, right? So if you just want to emulate it in Storybook, you could add it in the preview.js file in Storybook. You just import it there. You import your CSS and JavaScript there.
Good.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
And why do you think there's not an official Twig flavor of Storybook? Why are we jumping through hoops?
I don't know. That's an excellent question. No, I really don't know. I think this was, started by React. It's used heavily by React and Vue people, and it's just starting to get some traction elsewhere. I just also wanted to point out, I personally don't use web components, but I know a lot of people in Drupal land use web components. There is an official web components version. So people might want to look into that as well.
Yeah, at NedCamp this year, web components was all over the place. People were very excited about it. Had a lot of good presentations about it. And Pocosi, you're just always that guy. But like, yes, she is calling from an airport. Maybe you weren't here in enough time to notice that she's in Richmond on her way to Florida Drupal camp, and she had a long layover, and she was able to join the webinar. It's just a classic Leslie Glinch. She's always here. She's always given her all, even if it's from a tiny airport halfway across country.
Yeah, and John is actually going to be at Florida Drupal camp, so I'll see you there, John.
Oh, wonderful.
And we have another question, Chris, that came in.
Hey, we still got time, so we'll just let them keep coming. Have you built one Storybook instance for multiple implementations? So currently we have a React company library and a Pattern Lab Twig library.
Yeah, so you can't really do that with Storybook. You could probably build like a mega project and have 2 storybooks within that repo, but we typically just build 2 implementations because they're going to be used by different people. We have a source of truth, which is it's not there yet, but our source of truth is our design system website, which has all of the guidelines, the components, the designs, and then we just express those in each of the toolkits. And they're different. So the markup is going to be similar, but different in how you implement them into your systems. We have 2 different teams that are going to be using the React and Drupal one. So we actually keep them as 2 separate packages, which each has their own storybook. Yeah, but Storybook isn't really built to have multiple technologies or multiple frameworks in a single toolkit.
Excellent.
All right, I think that's all the questions. Melissa, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so glad I met you at Bad Camp and we had the discussion about having a webinar. So worked out really well. Really appreciate all the information that you shared with everybody today.
All right, thank you.
All right, so for everybody, thank you for joining, and we will see you. I hope to have something in April, and then we'll definitely have the Mercury editor one in May. But stay tuned, sign up for the newsletter or for the email, and we will let you know. Thanks again for joining.